No matter where you go on the internet nowadays, you'll likely see something about wokeness. I've personally spent a lot of time thinking about what this word actually means. I recently made a video that went in depth with the history of the word and how it grew to become meaningless. But I'm not satisfied. I want to keep digging into why people use this word and what it actually means. And I thought that perhaps the place to continue this search would be to look at what makes a movie woke. As in, what are the criteria for a woke piece of media? Because there's so much focus on things being woke every time a movie or TV show or video game comes out, but what does that actually mean? And to try to look into this question, I want to bring attention to this graphic that Dane from Actual Fandom found on Twitter titled, "I will never purchase media containing any of the following," which then goes on to list 15 criteria for woke aspects that ruin a piece of media. And granted, the person who made this is either very low IQ or they're a troll. However, I thought this would be relevant because I've seen almost all of these arguments made before in some way or another. So while I will show you guys the absolutely hilarious coping that this image contains, I will also try to make the discussion more meta, because these are common criteria for wokeless movies that I've heard before, just contained in one simple graphic. This discussion will also eventually lead out into a question for you guys, both the people who agree with me and those who disagree with me. So keep watching, leave a like, check out my Patreon, and let's get right into it. So this first one does kinda confuse me. Characters designed with San Francisco sensibilities. And I thought to myself, what are San Francisco sensibilities? Looking at the photo, all I see are women of color or women with dyed hair and shaved sides. I'm guessing this person is referring to like the stereotypical image of an SJW, you know, a short-haired, pink-dyed woman who's pushing their woke identity politics into media that they don't even care about. You know, the thing that gamers whined about for half a decade. I even tried searching this phrase up and I found nothing. So if someone understands what San Francisco sensibilities are, then please do let me know. For now, I'll put women with dyed hair and shaved heads on the list of woke criteria. Next, we have race swaps of any kind. And yes, I'm sure this person truly is against all kinds of race swaps, not just when it's black people. No. They call out all instances of white actors being cast in roles for POCs that have happened throughout cinematic history, naturally. Now, the topic of race swapping is actually an interesting one, because there is a lot of focus on it when characters like Annabeth the Little Mermaid and MJ, as recent examples, are changed from white to black. And I think a lot of people think that it's hypocritical that people on the left have been complaining about whitewashing, but then also support it when previously white roles are cast with black actors. I'm sure you've seen the meme of Ryan Gosling playing Black Panther. However, we need to remember the distinction between equality and equity. Hollywood has throughout the majority of its history been incredibly white, with very few significant roles being given to people of color. Most of movie history has been dominated by white people. That has been the culture most often portrayed. And this doesn't mean that there's anything wrong with white people. I myself am a white man, and I, along with other white men, aren't responsible for this. However, I feel like it's my responsibility to acknowledge this and understand that other people may not have grown up seeing themselves in almost every role like I have. I can't possibly begin to understand what representation truly means to people, because I've never had to be represented in media before. It was simply the default. Making an effort to include and represent more people from minority social groups in media when the race, gender, sexuality, or religion of said character has nothing to do with the core character is a good thing, because it has very little to no impact on a white man like myself, but can mean a lot to someone else who hasn't grown up with constantly seeing people who look like them represented in almost everything. And I often hear this argument that, well, just make new characters instead of changing already existing characters. But new characters are being made all the time. But that doesn't mean that diversifying new iterations of already established characters is a bad thing either. But examples like making Black Panther white wouldn't even be remotely the same as the Little Mermaid being black. We need to look at context and history. So yeah, this whole argument about race swapping is a very nuanced one that I understand why we sometimes disagree on, but it's also a topic that I just think is made out to be much worse than what it actually is. I'd love to discuss this further down in the comments, but I should be moving on now. Writing contains overtly anti-white themes. Now, first of all, this is Fred from the new Velma show, which everyone dislikes, not just people on the right, but also on the left. This show isn't really woke if we use the definition of referring to progressivism. It's a show that really just pisses off everyone. Secondly, the topic of demasculating male characters and movies hating men is a topic that I've talked about quite a few times. On screen right now is a recent video where I discuss a video made by The Critical Drinker in which I argue against his claims that Hollywood hates men. I'd recommend checking out that video to understand why I don't think this argument holds up. Any female character has their breasts reduced to any extent. Now this is the first of a couple of criteria that this person lists about how women are supposed to be eye candy for the male viewers and nothing more. Women aren't allowed to have agency, they definitely shouldn't talk back to men, they need to be sexy with big boobas, showing a lot of skin, and they need to look like models, even when living in post-apocalyptic robot dinosaur infested worlds with warring tribes. That makes sense, right? Also, comparing Lara Croft in these old video games to Lara Croft in a movie is just an incredibly useless example. They could have instead compared the older video games to the newer video games, which granted would still be fucking irrelevant and pathetic, but it would at least make this argument better. I swear, it's fucking annoying when I can make a better argument than these fucking people. But yeah, essentially there are multiple arguments here regarding women, and that one of the wokest things you can possibly do is desexualize women, because then you're preventing basement dwellers from getting off to a couple of pixels. Dialogue is localized to insert progressive politics and ideology. Now, I'm not familiar with the media in question here, but I'm guessing this argument is similar to the people who complained when Ellie said the word bigot in The Last of Us Part 2.
I don't want to hear what that bigot has to say.
Some people even called this unrealistic, obviously believing that the word bigot was only created a couple of years ago. But listen, there are instances of a piece of media almost preaching to the audience, trying to tell the viewer the message rather than show them through the story and characters. And I agree that this is annoying, but that's more just the problem with the writing. The exact same message can be executed wildly different in two different pieces of media. So my question is whether something is only woke when a progressive message is forced on the viewer in an unsatisfying way, or whether woke is simply just progressive messages in general. I've received different answers from different people, but yes, I'll add, don't use progressive lingo in movies to the list. Now I also don't really know much about this middle example here, but the message marketing or community interaction involves lecturing, insulting, gaslighting, or guilting your potential customers is up the same alleyway as some of the previous points, in that lecturing in pieces of media is annoying, and that companies often use progressive messages to profit, oftentimes producing incredibly cheap and insincere wokeness. Also, I agree that a company insulting, gaslighting, and guilting its audience is a bad thing. My only question is, how do you recognize this? When does this happen? Sometimes people will get insulted over nothing. We do live in a society of snowflakes, and I think we all tend to get offended by things online, especially people like this person. I genuinely love examples of this gaslighting and guilting of the customers. It definitely happens, I don't deny that. I just think it's a very vague argument that's easy to make about basically anything you don't like. Grooming and LGBT magnification. Now, of course, we had to sprinkle in a little bit of transphobia just for good measure, and I'm pretty sure this example is from Blue's Clues, a kids program supposedly showing a drag queen. And to anyone making this idiotic argument that LGBT people and drag queens are harming children, when people on the right have shown multiple times that they don't give a flying fuck about children, given how they block any attempt at gun control, the highest killer of young people in America. They block legislation aimed at making mental health easier to receive, after repeatedly saying that the shooter problem in America is due to mental health, and they block any legislation that would make life better for mothers and children after birth, even after going to the ends of the earth to outlaw abortion and protect the rights of a fucking fetus. If anyone tells you that the Republicans in power in America care about children, then you need to question the hell out of that person's motives or where they get their sources from, because it's just not true. It's all just an act to seem like they care, when in reality they just want power and money. They don't care who they burn down as they go, and they instill these thoughts in the minds of their viewers and supporters. Like this guy here who believes that meeting LGBT people and drag queens is somehow gonna hurt children? Seriously, transphobia is running rampant, and it's not going to stop as long as Republicans are saying shit like this. This is actually dangerous. This could get trans people killed. But basically, this was all to say that this argument is fucking dumb, ignorant, uninformed, and pathetic. Now there are a few more points about the desexualization of women, and it honestly reminded me of this message I got from another channel, saying that actresses are only on screen to be eye candy to the men. The insecurity in some people really is baffling. And also, this person has a hilarious rant here where he makes the bold claim that the average bra size around the world is D. But yes, I mentioned this topic earlier in this video, so let's just move on. Emasculates male characters while female characters are portrayed as butch, flawless, and unbeatable. Now this example is likely about how Princess Peach now wears pants, and isn't just a damsel in distress, because oh how awful it would be for women to have any agency in our media. And this new Peach obviously means that Mario is now demasculated. However, my friend, you could not be further from the truth. Mario's sex appeal is greater than any person who has ever unironically said the word woke put together, and that's just a fact. Sorry to burst your bubble. And after showing annoyance at some woke content creators, they finish off by saying gender erasure. Who does this benefit? Even most trans people identify as one gender. What's the point? This is honestly some decent understanding of trans people, using the words gender and identity correctly. Too bad these people can only ever say something true about trans people when they're shitting on other minorities. Listen, having body 1 and body 2 literally just makes the game more inclusive to non-binary people, or people who are more gender fluid. It's a feature that doesn't affect you in the slightest, so just move on and play your fucking game. Most games that do this are role-playing games, so fucking roleplay. It's really not that deep. Now they end off with this hilarious rant, and that's simply it. There is no discussion. You are not entitled to my money. You will not insult, lecture, gaslight, guilt, or degrade me into giving you money for products that don't appeal to me and are overly made to attack and tear me down. There is no debate. You want my money? Knock all this off. I don't owe you an explanation or any other damned thing. I'm simply telling you that I will not buy these products for myself, my friends, or my children, and you can't do a damned thing to force me to. The pure coping at display is fucking marvelous, but it's also a bit concerning because they're not nearly the only person who thinks like this. People who live in delusion, who think that companies give a single shit about their opinions, who believe that wokeness is done to attack and tear them down, who are hypnotized by anti-woke rhetoric, that it would be naive to hope for even a shred of self-awareness. If this is real, then it's a damn good example of this mind virus, and if this is a troll, then it's a damn good recreation of a person who believes this stuff, because I've seen all these arguments many times before, as I'm sure a lot of you have too. However, as funny as these arguments are to dunk on, I do want to be serious for just a moment, because I think it's important to try to engage with people who genuinely don't like wokeness in media and listen to what their reasoning is, because of course this example that we've been showing is an extreme. Obviously, anyone who decides to not like a piece of media on the sole basis of said piece of media having people of color and women are just sad individuals, but there likely are good arguments that can be made too. I've seen some before. For example, I do sympathize with the argument that wokeness is often cheap and insincere, done in order to profit, because this is true. Companies want to make money. It's all capitalism, and oftentimes companies do utilize progressive messages to solely make money. They don't care about the actual message, just the money. And thus, if so-called wokeness and progressivism stopped being profitable, then most big companies would just move on to something different. There are no values or morals in a company that wants to make as much money as possible. A critique like this is completely fair, however, I will only accept this critique from people who otherwise care about good representation and real progressivism. I see too many people make this same argument that these companies showing off their wokeness often can come across as cheap and insincere, then these people also just dislike progressive things in general, and the quality and sincerity of it doesn't really matter to them. Just because an argument is good doesn't mean the intentions are, which is why I'm often wary of people who make this argument, because I need to be sure that the person is seriously trying to improve wokeness rather than just using this argument to mask their actual hateful beliefs behind a wall of simply caring about the quality of diversity, representation, and other progressive messages. So yes, there absolutely are valid arguments that can be made against so-called woke culture, and even though this word is so ill-defined, we all still use it in our discussions anyways, so I feel like we need to try to gain a collective understanding of it. My first reaction when I hear someone blame the bad quality of a piece of media on wokeness is to assume that this person is hateful and ignorant. However, that's an incredibly reductive thing for me to do, because despite having had this assumption be true Most of the time, by making these uncharitable assumptions, I'm still limiting the potential to have a meaningful discussion about it, since I'm starting off with the viewpoint that this person is probably just an idiot or even a bigot. But that's potentially not the case. Just because I've dealt with thousands of anti-woke people who genuinely do have hateful views, doesn't mean that anyone who uses the word woke does too. I'm sure there are real and valid qualifications that deem a piece of media to be woke. Whether these qualities make it bad or good doesn't matter just yet. For now, I'm mainly interested in what actually makes a movie or TV show or video game woke. And I've recently realized that I don't utilize the fact that I have so many people who disagree with me in my comment section enough. Because like, why don't I just ask you? While there definitely are a lot of trolls down there, there's still a bunch of level-headed people who simply see things differently than I do. So I ask you this question: what makes something woke? And if there are different levels of woke, then what would make it good or bad? The question of wokeness has confused me for a long time now because it has a lot of nuance and history behind it. So maybe I need to take a step back and set my sights on where this whole thing started. For now, I want to wish you all a lovely day, and I'll see you guys later.